dry cleaning establishment or a convenience store in Omaha to invest your life savings in and run as a business, you think about the same sort of things. You think about the competitive position and what it would look like 5 or 10 years from now and how you were going to run it, who was going to run it for you, and how much you had to pay. And that's exactly what we think of as when we look at a stock, because a stock is nothing other than a piece of a business.
I want to go back to one question that was mentioned earlier. I really think if you want to be a good evaluator of businesses, an investor, you really ought to figure out a way without too much personal damage to run a lousy business for a while. I think you learn a whole lot more about business by actually struggling with a terrible business for a couple of years than you learn by getting into a very good one where the business itself is so good that you can't mess it up. I don't know whether Charlie has a view on that or not, but it was a big part of our learning experience, and I think a bigger part in the sense than being involved with good businesses was actually being involved in some bad businesses and just seeing
how awful it was,
how awful it is, and how little you can do about it, and how IQ does not solve the problem, and a whole bunch of things. It's a useful experience, but I wouldn't advise too much of it. What do you think so, Charlie? Here,
it was very useful to us. There's nothing like personal painful experience if you want to learn, and we certainly had our share of it.
Okay, Becky.
The answer to the first part is sort of, and maybe the second part is sort of all of the above. I mean, we read a lot, and we read daily publications, we read weekly or monthly periodicals, we read annual reports, we read 10Ks, we read 10Qs. And fortunately, the investment business is a business where knowledge accumulates. I mean, everything you learn when you're 20 or 30, you may tweak some as you go along, but it all kind of builds into a knowledge base that's useful forever. And we, at least, I read, Charlie used to read, may still read a fair amount, but I read a lot of 10Ks, read a lot of annual reports. 40 or 50 years ago, I did a lot of talking to managements. I used to go out and take a trip every now and then and really drop in on maybe 15 or 20 companies. I haven't done that for a long, long time. I find everything we do, pretty much I find through public documents. When I made an offer for Clayton Homes, I'd never visited the business. I'd never met the people. I'd done it over the phone. I'd read Jim Clayton's book. I looked at the 10Ks. I knew every company in the industry. I look at competitors. And I try to understand the business and not have any preconceived notions. And there is adequate information out there to evaluate a great many businesses. We do not find it particularly helpful to talk to managements. Managements frequently want to come to Omaha and talk to me, and they usually have a variety of reasons that they say they want to talk to me, but what they're really hoping is we get interested in their stock. That never works. Managements are not the best reporting. In most cases, the figures tell us more than a management does. So we do not spend any real amount of time talking to management. When we buy a business, we look at the record to determine what the management's like, and then we want to size them up personally, as I said earlier, whether they will keep working. But we don't give a hoot about anybody's projections. We don't even want to hear about them in terms of what they're going to do in the future. We've never found any value in anything like that. But just a general business knowledge, what we've seen work, what we've seen has not worked.
I think you should read everything you can. I can tell you in my own case, I think by the time I was 10, I'd read every book in the Omaha Public Library that had anything to do with investing, and many of them I'd read twice. So I don't think there's anything like reading. and not just as limited to investing at all, but you just got to fill up your mind with various competing thoughts and sort them out as to what really makes sense over time. And then once you've done a lot of that, I think you have to jump in the water, because investing on paper and doing, and investing with real money, is like the difference between reading a romance novel and doing something else. So there is nothing like actually having a little experience in investing, and you soon find out whether you like it. If you like it, if it turns you on, you're probably going to do well on it. And the earlier you start, the better in terms of reading. But I read a book at age 19 that formed my framework for thinking about investments ever since. I mean, what I am doing today at 76 is running things through the same thought pattern that I got from a book I read when I was 19. And I read all the other books too, but you have to read a lot of them to know which ones really do jump out at you and which ideas jump out at you over time. So I would say that read, and then on a small scale, in a way that can't hurt you financially, do some of it yourself. Charlie?
Well, Sandy Gottesman, who is a Berkshire director, runs a large and successful investment operation. And you can tell what he thinks causes people to learn to be good investors by noticing his employment practices. When a young man comes to Sandy, he asks a very simple question, no matter how young the man is. He says, "What do you own and why do you own it?" And if you haven't been interested enough in the subject to have that involvement already, why, he'd rather you go somewhere else.
Yeah. That whole idea that you own a business, is vital to the investment process. I mean, if you were going to buy a farm, you'd say, I'm buying this 160-acre farm because I expect that the farm will produce 120 bushels an acre of corn, or 45 bushels an acre of soybeans, and I can buy the fertilizer. You go through the whole process. It'd be a quantitative decision, and it would be based on pretty solid stuff. It would not be based on what you saw on television that day. It would not be based on what your neighbor said to you or anything of the sort. It's the same thing with stocks. I used to always recommend to my students that they take a yellow pad like this, and if they're buying 100 shares of General Motors at 30, and General Motors has whatever it has out, 600 million shares or a little less, that they say, I'm going to buy the General Motors company for $18 billion, and here's why. And if they can't write a good essay on that subject, they've got no business buying 100 shares or 10 shares or 1 share at $30 per share, because they are not subjecting it to business tests. And to get in the habit of thinking that way.